Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are looking forward to discussing ways to both maximize efficiency and security within Epic on Azure. Before we get started, allow me to introduce the team. My name is Jonathan Hobbs. I'm part of Sapphire Health's Operations Center, and I'll be moderating today's session. Joining me today are our presenters. We have Christine Westcott, Sapphire Health's Director of Service Quality, accompanied by Tyler Jordan, Sapphire Health's Director of Cloud Services. And last but not least, we are joined by Jeff Carl, the Technology Director at Sapphire Health's Epic Server System team. Without further ado, I will be delegating to the presenters. Tyler, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I'd like to start by going over some of the benefits of the cloud. Many of the benefits that are associated with building in Azure instead of on-premises are well known, but they're more compelling than ever. First, Azure offers unparalleled scalability, allowing organizations to easily adjust resources up or down based on demand without the need for any significant upfront investments in their physical hardware. This flexibility can be useful anytime an organization is experiencing rapid growth or fluctuating workloads. Epic organizations are well familiar with the need to build out capacity for major upgrades, the need to scale out for additional environments, or the additional of more end users with the acquisition of a new hospital. With Azure, this can be done in hours without figuring out how to carve up existing on-premises infrastructure, and the pay-as-you-go pricing ensures cost efficiency. Second, Azure's global data center presence enables low latency access to infrastructure all around the world and the country. Organizations can easily build in many distinct geographic regions, and in many cases have access to multiple data centers within each region. This allows for the organization to easily build in a geographical distant area to ensure that business continuity is maintained with minimal downtime. And for many products, high availability and disaster recovery can be built in. This means that rather than having to find perhaps a colo that's in a different location to make sure that your two data centers aren't right next to each other, you can easily do so through Azure. Finally, building in Azure grants healthcare systems access to the latest and greatest in hardware. In your traditional on-premises infrastructure, you would have to go through a hardware purchasing cycle. And sometimes in order to make the most out of existing equipment, you may find yourself running on older processors longer than you'd like. With Azure, virtual machines can easily be upgraded to the newer SKUs with faster processors without the need for any complex hardware upgrades or purchasing cycles. This ensures that your response time metrics are always meeting the needs of your end users. All you would need to do is power down the server, change the SKU to the latest and greatest processor, and power it back up. To talk a little bit more about Epic specifically, there's a purpose-built Azure reference architecture that was made for Epic organizations that are implementing or migrating to Azure. This architecture has been optimized for scale, resiliency, and cost management so that healthcare organizations can be sure that their Azure design matches best practices. It's a really great starting location for anyone that's new to Azure or to really cross-reference your existing architecture should you already be in Azure. Finally, the migration to Azure presents an opportunity for hospitals to start utilizing infrastructure as code, such as Terraform. Infrastructure as code ensures that environments are provisioned consistently, that eliminates manual errors, and enables reproducible deployments across development, staging, and production. The same environment can be built and torn down over and over again, and you can feel confident that it will be made the exact same way each time. As an example, for implementing organizations, this means that you can go through your non-production build that environment, and make changes as necessary during the implementation process. Then when you're ready to build out the production environment, you can be confident that no small setting has been overlooked. You would simply translate that infrastructure as code, point it to your new production subscription, make any changes to the network as possible, and then you have the exact same environment reproduced just like non-production. Infrastructure as code allows these configurations to be version controlled with technology such as Git, that allows teams to collaborate, track changes, and roll back to previous states as needed. If you've ever wondered when a setting got changed or who changed it, this allows technical teams to go through the commit history and easily find out that answer. Changes can even be enforced through an approval process where multiple team members, they have to review and okay an infrastructure change before it is applied to the environment. Finally, infrastructure as code can speed up your deployment process, just as easily making 100 servers almost as quickly as it makes one. All of these servers can be made identically, and changes to these servers can be made across the board. Our team at Sapphire has a ready-to-go code base that we utilize to jumpstart projects and help organizations begin their own infrastructure as code journey. With that, I'd like to pass the baton off to Jeff, who is our Technical Director of Epic Server Systems, to talk a little bit more about the ODB side of things in Azure.
Thank you, Tyler. One of the first considerations we must make is our environment strategy. Which environments do we want to put into Azure first? A common selection is the disaster recovery or alternate production environment. This will be a full-sized mirrored copy of your on-premises production database. And having this in Azure immediately provides extra security in the event of a downtime and the ease of transferring this data to the eventual production footprint that we have in Azure. Regular testing of this environment will provide an excellent idea of what running production will look like in the cloud and give us a good holistic idea of where our presentation tier is going to interact with the cloud environments. An alternative is the training or non-production environments. These are smaller environments that are far easier to migrate up to the cloud, and they provide for regular tests of actual user load and gauging the presentation tier experience without impacting your current production workloads. And a new environment type that Epic has now been releasing is the IRE or CRO, the Isolated Recovery Environment. This will be an air-gapped, full-sized replicated mirror with a standby database that can be activated during emergency. So this will be network isolated from your on-premises and any other Azure accounts, with the exception of the ports required for mirroring and Epic feeding. This will safeguard against cyber attacks and potentially provide a source for environment capabilities during unplanned downtimes. The Azure architecture will feature for our production environments the premium SSD V2s. These have high performance in the IOPS and throughputs, and by selecting these will factor in determining which regions in the cloud are available to us. The virtual machine sizes will be memory optimized, and the backups in the cloud can use Azure Backup and Azure Recovery Services Vault. These provide us resiliency and restore capabilities, making it easier to set up new environments in the cloud without the need to transfer more data from on-prem. The big question after this will be, how do we get the data into the cloud? Our initial cloud seeding will begin with tests of blank data sets to determine our transfer seeds so that we can better estimate how long it'll take to get your entire on-premises production database into Azure. Once we've determined that, we will do a variety of tests between rsync and SCP to see which transfer technology provides the best speeds and the best encryption for your given use case. These timings are important to us because we want to make sure that the time between the backup that we use to seed the database and the time that we get the full backup into the cloud is shorter than the on-premises mirror journal retention rate. When an Epic database can be from tens of terabytes to hundreds of terabytes, these transfer times can take tens of hours to almost a week. And so we want to be sure that we have all our settings correct so that we don't cause undue storage concerns on your production journal file systems. If for some reason it seems that we will not be able to make the times in a short enough span of time, we can use the Azure Data Box to put the data onto a device on your on-premises and physically move that to an Azure data center. The environments in Azure will be network controlled via network security groups to maintain security and allow correct access. And these will be set up through a series of VNets and subnets, generally in a hub and spoke model that we will work with you to architect. And thank you. I'll pass it on to Christine.
Thank you, Jeff. Now that we've talked about some of the infrastructure as code setup, as well as seeding your Epic database, I wanted to review some timeline considerations for what an Epic to Azure migration may look like. One of the first stepping stones into this is going to be understanding where you're at in your Azure journey. You may already have a footprint into Azure. It may not be Epic, but understanding what that looks like and realizing what's realistic for where you're starting before planning and putting milestones to your Epic migration is critical. Other considerations you may have to go through is what other hospital plans do you already have scheduled on your calendar for your organization. You may have Epic upgrades, Epic updates. You may be purchasing and rolling out to various clinics, various hospital systems. How does that fit within your Epic to Azure migration? Other Epic application, other Epic application activities may also impact what environment you do first. That leads nicely into what environment goes first. Jeff talked about the various options that one has in order to decide what environment you move first. There are many. So working with your hospital operations and application teams is important to deciding what makes sense for your environment, what makes sense for your organization. Now that we've talked about some of the timeline considerations, I wanted to review what some of the lessons learned are in working with other organizations to move Epic to Azure securely. There are many folks impacted by this, so you'll want to have buy-in from various teams. You'll of course want your leadership buy-in. This is a large change for you as an Epic organization moving to the cloud. So having leadership be able to buy into the philosophy and the process changes and be able to support your operational and technical teams is critical. The other buy-in you will need is from your hospital operations teams. You'll need to, when you move production, take downtimes of your system. So we will need buy-in from those to say what makes the most time, what makes the most sense for that time when it comes to it to move your production systems. We do want to be, we want to reduce downtimes, but we also want to be strategic in when we move that. But make sure that the system that's built in Azure is sufficient for those needs and we can stay in Azure. We don't have to fail back if there's an unplanned outage or an unknown issue. We want to be able to quickly and effectively work with operations to fail back if that's needed. The last buy-in pieces that we'll need are the technical and Epic application teams. Much of the lift is going to be on the Epic technical application teams. Technical teams, however, the Epic application teams will need to be involved in forms of testing. You are migrating all of their build, all of their third-party integrations up into Azure, so they'll need to do integration testing to make sure that those integrations that they have on-prem today with third-party systems continue to work in the future. So having application leadership buy-in and Epic application teams buy-in to do thorough testing for your non-production and production environments is critical to ensuring that production failover to Azure is successful. Some other lessons learned are going to be starting with a very specific goal in mind to define what success means for you in your organization. As we all know, Epic Systems is not only the only player. There are third-party systems that make your Epic organization, Epic Hospitals, run. So defining what is a success for your organization is critical that everyone in the organization IT system understands that. To that, making it an iterative process, making it repeatable to say, we're doing this at this time during phase one, you have potentially have a phase two for those things that make it a success overall over a longer time period. So making it repeatable, making it iterative, especially as we have multiple environments like Jeff called out, making those as dynamic and repeatable as possible allows systems and teams to get into a regular routine to migrate that successfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Now, let's move on to some frequently asked questions. We could start with, what are some other considerations to moving the Epic system to the cloud as a whole?
Thanks, Jonathan. I alluded to that a little bit with my mention of third-party systems and co-travelers. These are the systems that make your Epic hospital organization function and operate outside of the Epic systems of your operational database, your client systems, and your Cogito systems. These are things like radiology, cardiology, your interface engines, any third-party systems for document management systems, and there are many more in your system. Understanding what, when, and how they migrate to Azure is going to be critical to understanding and being successful in both migrating, but migrating securely to Azure.
Understood. Thank you, Christine. Next, we have, is there the ability to dynamically spin servers up or down to save money when running in Azure?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's one that we get a lot. I talked about how with the moving to the cloud, you have the opportunity to save money by only, using the resources that you need. You're using the pay-as-you-go system. It doesn't always work quite that way in the Epic world. So for example, you're not going to be able to dynamically spin up and down Hyperspace web servers based on the time of day or the day of the week. With the way that the session affinity works and the way that deployments work with Kuiper, you're not going to be able to dynamically spin up and down servers in that way. However, what we do see is with alternate production environments, we often see that organizations use a pilot light approach, where for their servers that have large amounts for capacity, so perhaps your VDAs, perhaps your Hyperspace web servers, that you have a couple of those on at all times to make sure that the environment's available, that you're monitoring, and that you're testing any load balancing, but you don't have the full capacity running 24/7 when it's just sitting there not being used. We work with organizations to come up with a plan that if they're to fail over, can rapidly spin up the additional servers in a safe and maintainable way to do that scale out process in the event of an activation, whether planned or unplanned. And that way they're not spending the money for the entire set of servers that they're not being used. So to answer your question, in some cases, yes, we are able to dynamically spin up and down servers, but it really depends on the application, the environment, and the use case. And that's something that just needs to be discussed amongst each organization in terms of where that might be possible.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tyler. Before we wrap up, if you wish to learn more about us at Sapphire Health and Azure migration, please scan this QR code to learn more. From there, Christine, Tyler, Jeff, thank you all for sharing your expertise. In closing, it has been my pleasure to moderate, and I hope to see y'all soon in future sessions. Have a great day from the team over at Sapphire Health.